Hi everyone out there in Facebook land. This is Heather with PersephoneReturns.com, and I am back with my second video, my second live video here on Facebook. And this is basically going to serve as sort of a continuation of the first. I just wanted to sort of introduce myself and just show my face with the first video, and now I'm just going to talk a little bit about sort of my background and how I got into astrology. I'll talk about my teachers and my astrology style and all those different fun things. And I promise this will be the last video that's about me. After this, I plan to do a lot of different astrology videos on here. So especially I think early next week is when I'm going to do a really in-depth video about the eclipses, because eclipse season is starting very soon, actually. With the new moon in Leo, it's going to be coming up real quick. So we definitely want to dive into that, because that's going to be really important, and a lot of people are already starting to feel that energy. And also, if you have any suggestions for topics for videos, if there's something that you really want to learn about, that you think that I could do a video on, please comment below. I'm very open to suggestions, and maybe I will take your suggestion and make a video out of it. And of course, I'll tag you in it so you can see it. But yeah, other than that, I just wanted to sort of introduce myself a little bit more, talk about my background and how I got into astrology. You can hear my dog barking in the background. I apologize for that. But so I've been studying astrology for about 7 years now. I first got into astrology when I was in graduate school. I was going to school for clinical psychology. I had my master's degree. And at that time, I was going through a really difficult period in my life. There was a lot of stuff that was just absolutely going wrong. There was a few months where it was really hard. I felt very isolated. I had, no money. I was absolutely broke. I was sick. My cat got really sick too. She required emergency surgery to save her life. My living situation was absolutely awful. I had a roommate situation that wasn't working out. My house was awful, and there were so many different things that were just kind of going wrong all at once, and it made it really hard at that time. And a friend of mine who was really into astrology and crystals and all this sort of new agey kind of stuff, I went to go visit her and hang out with them, and she started talking about astrology and like different transits that were happening and things like that, which she normally did, and I didn't really pay too much attention to it because I was very scientific minded. I was in grad school for clinical psych. I was working in a lab doing research, behavioral neuroscience research, and I wanted to get my PhD. I was very skeptical of things like astrology, and she described to me what was going on, and it was just so ridiculously on point to what there's my dogs fighting in the background. They're gonna make a lot of guest appearances in these videos. But so she was describing to me basically everything that was going on with me, and there was just no way that she could have possibly known that. I hadn't told her about anything yet. We hadn't really talked about any of it. So I asked her, I became very curious, and I asked her how I could learn more, and she recommended a book to me. So I went, I bought the book, and I started, picking apart my birth chart and looking at all of these different, components in my chart and reading about them. And there were things that I was reading about and that I was learning through these books about myself that, I didn't really even fully realize and understand at that point. And it was just resonating so deeply, and there were things that I was discovering that there's no way like that this could be a coincidence. It was too spot on and too accurate. So at that point I kind of became hooked, and it started to become a little bit of an obsession. I have I have a Scorpio rising sign with Pluto on my ascendant, so I can, once I get really excited and passionate about something, I tend to run with it, and I tend to get really intense about it. And it's also really good for research, which is kind of where I was going with my life. I still do kind of my own version of research with astrology, but not quite the same as what I was doing before. And so that's how I got started in like learning about astrology, I never thought that it would be anything that I'd be doing for a career or anything like that, but it was something that was just so interesting to me. And so over the course of the next few years after that, I started learning more and more, and I finished my degree and all of that. I got my yoga teacher certification, and I did a trauma-informed yoga therapy certification, because I've always been interested in working with people who have, PTSD, trauma, anxiety, things like that, because I have a lot of experience with anxiety myself. And, I always wanted to help other people, especially women who, have been disempowered to, find their own power again after they've struggled with some sort of trauma or abuse. And that's something that I still, strive to do today. I just do it sort of in my own way. And yeah, so, I fell in love with astrology, and, it's just this beautiful system that connects everything to everything else. And, it connects the mind to the body, to the emotions, to, the spiritual aspects of ourselves, to, the physical reality and what's going on around us. It's this amazing system that's been sort of perfected and elaborated on for thousands of years now. And, so I study a lot of sort of ancient, very traditional astrology techniques. I look at a little bit of Vedic astrology, and, I use some techniques that are derived from that, especially when I'm looking at things like the North and South nodes, because the Vedic system tends to have a better understanding of that for some reason. But I'm primarily a Western astrologer. I use the tropical zodiac. And my teachers have all been Western astrologers. My very first real life astrology teacher was a man named Robert Phoenix. I actually discovered him on Gaiam TV. He did interviews all the time on this show called Open Minds with Regina Meredith, and I just loved his style of astrology. He's very much about sort of taking current events and picking them apart through the lens of astrology and astrological symbolism, and he's really able to get to the core and to the truth of a lot of what's going on by doing that, and I found that to be fascinating. And he's a very good personal astrologer as well, so he was my very first teacher. I did over 6 months of one-on-one classes with him, and so that was pretty awesome. And now I'm actually taking a medical astrology course with an astrologer named Lynn Coiner. She does primarily medical astrology, but she also does astrology that's very psychological. And I think kind of the common denominator between all the teachers that I tend to seek out is that they tend to develop their own systems or their own ways of going about, interpreting the charts. Although I do think it's really important to have a solid foundation in sort of the roots of astrology and what we've learned over, thousands of years, times are changing. We're in a different place right now. We're in a different reality right now. And as our reality and our consciousness shifts, so does the interpretation of the astrology. And as we move along, through the years and decades and centuries and all of that, more and more planets and objects are being discovered. And those planets and objects, they sort of relate to the different aspects of our consciousness that are being discovered. And, so to just stick with what's tradition and what's, kind of tried and true, I don't think that really works. So I'm always really interested in people that develop their own systems, especially when I find that those systems are really accurate. And so Robert has very much his own way of going about doing astrology, and I love that so much. And, Lynn, she really works with some of the trans-Neptunian planets and some of the asteroids and stuff. Sorry, I apologize. Stella, that's enough. It's okay. So she works with, things like Trans-Pluto. That's how I started getting into working with Trans-Pluto, and how I made that connection between Trans-Pluto and Persephone, and how I started really working with Eris and some of the dwarf planets was through, Lynn Coiner's work. So I'm really excited right now. I'm doing a medical astrology course, which is sort of tying everything all together. It ties my psychological background and, my interest in psychology with, this sort of mind-body connection where I'm learning about how our childhood traumas and our psychological traumas and, the emotions that we hold inside of ourselves sort of express themselves sometimes through disease. And you can see that through the birth chart, because a lot of what we do as astrologers is very much looking at the psychology of the chart. So we look at the personality, we look at the different components of the energies and themes that play out in the lifetime. And I think it's really important to understand how that works in the body as well. I've always been interested in that mind-body connection. That's why I got my certification as a yoga teacher. That's why I got into trauma-informed yoga therapy, because there's definitely something to that. The emotions that we sort of hold onto and repress and, fail to express appropriately, they do turn into disease. And that's something that, a lot of different like healing modalities sort of have in common, is this notion that disease stems from, not just environmental causes, but psychological and emotional causes. So, I'm really excited to continue learning about that. And then hopefully someday I can, do some medical astrology readings for all of you. But in the meantime, what I do is primarily psychological Western astrology. I do look at events that are coming up and things like that as well. And I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say. So yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this video. The next one will definitely be about the eclipses. I think it's going to be probably on the 18th, but we'll see. I'll post a little, notification to everyone that we're going to do a live video, because if we get enough people on the live video, I'd love to do a Q&A about the eclipses and all of that. People have a lot of questions. Even when I'm at the grocery store, if I tell someone what I do, like while we're standing in line, they'll bring up the eclipse that's coming in August. So I think people are hungry for information about that. So I'm definitely going to bring you that, and then I'm going to do a series on Trans-Pluto, Persephone, and probably on Eris as well. But if you have any other suggestions, please let me know. And also, right now, if you want to get a reading before the eclipses start, so you can kind of figure out, what you're getting into, I am doing a reading special until July 22nd, so you can still get $20 off of any 1-hour reading. Also $20 off of all of my gift certificates now through July 22nd. And I'm doing new interactive video astrology readings, which have been very fun for me. So yeah, now is a really great time if you want to, figure out what's going to happen for these eclipses in your own chart and in your own life. But yeah, I think that's all for today. So I will see you back next time with some, astrology knowledge. Have a good night, everyone.